Hi, I'd like to talk now about the second part of my testimony. I finished last time with the idea of me going forward for ministry, but I want to take a step backwards from that and go back to the time immediately after my conversion experience. I had that experience on March 14th, 1978. It was round about Easter, just before Easter, and I went home after the term finished. It was a boarding school, and I went home to stay with my parents. And I discovered when I got home that my father was home. He'd broken his neck or fractured his neck. He'd been in hospital, and my mother, in some desperation, had invited a local spiritualist healer to come and pray with my father or lay hands on him, and my father had begun to get better, so much so that he was then home, as I said, for Easter. But as a result of this, my parents had joined the local spiritualist church in a town called Tiverton. I explained to them my conversion experience. They were sceptical, to say the least, and suggested quite openly that they didn't think it would last, and tried to encourage me to go along to the new spiritualist church that they were attending. My mother had been discerned as a clairvoyant, and my father a medium, and after a lot of pressure I eventually went along to one of their services. It was probably one of the worst experiences of my life. I felt excruciatingly uncomfortable. I really felt that I was in the wrong place. The whole atmosphere was one which I didn't understand what I was experiencing, but I believe it was not of God, at least from my point of view. My parents continued with their spiritualist practices, and eventually they decided to leave the Tiverton church and actually set up one in our own house. In the meantime, I had started attending my local Anglican church when I was home, and we came to the end of the school term of a school in Crediton, and I came home and I'd got enough GCSEs and O-levels by this point to start doing some A-level studies, which I was going to in the local town of Barnstaple. And I attended a church in South Molton where we were living. Through that time in the church, I met some people who belonged to a prayer group in the town of South Molton that used to meet in the home of the primary school teacher. So I started going along to that, and I was having more and more difficult time in the house with my parents, having seances most evenings. And I wasn't sleeping, I was having nightmares, and things were pretty awful. I was still passionate about my faith, but I really didn't know what I was doing. The people in this prayer group suggested to me that what I needed was the Holy Spirit. Now, I'd heard of the Holy Spirit. Of course, you can't really go to church without hearing about the Holy Spirit, but I really didn't understand what they were saying. And I'd even been to a confirmation service, my own confirmation service, but I really was none the wiser. So they explained to me about receiving the Holy Spirit and told me in no uncertain terms that I needed to wait and to just seek God as to whether it was the right thing for me to do, which I tried to do through these nightmares, through the difficulties. And eventually, a few weeks later, I came back to them saying, yeah, please, if the Holy Spirit is, going to help, I want the Holy Spirit. So that evening they laid hands on me and they prayed that I was filled with the Holy Spirit. Now, I didn't experience anything dramatic at that point. There was no tongues of fire or speaking in tongues or anything like that. It was just them praying for me and me asking God to fill me afresh. Having said that, when I got home, I did find that I was able to pray more easily. And the following day, I went along to the sixth form college. It was about a half an hour trip by bus into town. And one of my friends there, a Christian friend in the Christian Union at the sixth form college, came up to me and said, "Oh, Phil, what's happened to you? You look amazing." And I said, what do you mean? He said, well, there's just something about you. It just seems that, you know, you kind of met God last night or something. I don't know. And I said, hang on. Yeah, I've kind of got filled with the Holy Spirit. I would go, whoa, you know, and this was kind of really, and I had not really experienced anything myself but other people looking at me saw that there was something different about my life. To cut a long story short, Christmas that year was pretty awful. Everything kind of fell apart. I was looking forward to Christmas as a new Christian. It was going to be a time of excitement for me, and my parents invited some people around for seances, and the whole thing really was pretty horrendous. And I decided, having had a fairly acrimonious argument with my parents, and particularly my mother, that I needed to leave home. So as soon as possible after that, early in January, I got what few things I had that I could count as mine together, and I left home to go and live in Barnstaple. Now, I didn't actually have anywhere to live in Barnstaple, so I spent several nights sleeping rough on in corners and things, and we got to a Sunday and I went along to the church, and I was looking pretty much worse for wear. I was having to use kind of loos in restaurants and things, and I hadn't any money, so I was quite hungry. And I explained to the vicar what was going on, and he amazingly and very wonderfully offered me a bed in his attic. He had two small children, and I was a 18-year-old with basically nowhere to go other than the sixth form college that I was attending, and he put me up in his attic, and I then stayed with him for several months. Various other members of the church also helped, and I started staying with them. I did a bit of sofa surfing, as it were, and eventually, once I got control of the grant money that I had as being a student at a sixth form college, my parents had retained control of that until the end of the term, end of the school year. The following year I applied in my own right and got control of the money, and I was then able to, with the help of the vicar, to obtain a small flat in Barnstaple. That summer and the following year were kind of probably one of the most amazing years of my life. The summer, the vicar had made an arrangement with some local churches in the villages around Barnstaple, who were wanting to hold summer clubs for their children, and he took some of the teenagers. There was about 40 teenagers in the church. How that came about is another story, but I was part of those teenagers in the church, and he took a group of us, about 10 or 11 of us, and invited us to go and stay with a local vicar, and we became a kind of a work party, a mission party for the local vicar to run his holiday club. And a group of us would go out there, we'd sing songs, play games, do activities with the children for about 2 weeks in the summer, and it was just amazing. And we came back to the church, Holy Trinity in Barnstaple, and were just so excited about what God was doing with the young people and with us and through us. And that autumn, the vicar wanted to do a mission to a local housing estate in the town, an area called Forches in Barnstaple, and he'd arranged to get hold of a marquee which was put up, and I was part of the group that was acting as security in there. We used to sleep the night in there. It was a mission for about 4 days, and we were sleeping the night there to stop local ruffians from taking it apart and doing whatever they wanted with it. And we stayed there, and during the day and the evening again we did various activities, and then in the evenings the vicar came along and gave talks, and there was some music, and lots of the locals would turn up. Now, one group in particular turned up, a small gang of about 10, 12 people turned up. They they were basically teenagers attending the local secondary school, and were renowned for their violence and the fact that they had been involved in various thefts and issues in the town with shops and so on. And they were hanging around in the marquee while the event was going on, causing problems. And eventually the vicar decided that enough was enough, and we came to the end of the final evening, and he asked me to put together a group of chairs in a small circle and invited these lads to come and sit and talk to us, or talk to him. And we had started up a conversation, and I must admit I was scared out of my wits. Here was a group of renowned, violent young men, the sort of people who had regularly beaten me up in the past in the school that I used to attend. Now, they didn't really know me at all. I was a little bit older than them, but to be honest, it was a very scary time for me being with them. And the leader of them, Dave, he was the most outspoken critic, without any knowledge of anything, just shouting and saying what a load of rubbish it was, and just being in your face, really. And he would say things like, if any of what you're saying is true, prove it, and I'll believe. But you can't, can you? So Mike said, yes, of course we can. I looked at him kind of quite surprised. He said, yeah, sure. Tell you what, Phil, why don't you go and take Dave over to the corner over there? And they taught me a 3-point kind of prayer of commitment, which I had in a little booklet. So if you go and pray the prayer of commitment with Dave and see what God does. And I go, yeah, okay. Not quite sure what's going on there. And so I took my little booklet, and there was me and Dave tucked in a corner of the thing. And he said, so what's all it about then? What do I have to do? I said, well, you need to accept the fact that you've messed up your life, say sorry to Jesus, and then invite him into your life and ask him to take over your life. Yeah, so how do I do that then? So I said, okay, well, look, tell you what, I'll pray a prayer and then you just say it after me. So I said about praying a prayer, and I was just having kittens. It was the most scary moment in my life up to that point. And so I read the prayer from the booklet, and Dave Pyle said it after me, and line after line, and we got to the end, and he said, oh, is that it then? And I said, yeah. And I said, shall we go back and join the others? So we went back and sat down with the others. Now, up to that point, as I said, Dave had been leading the discussion, but at that point, after he'd been to pray with me, he'd shut up. And without him leading the others, they kind of all just faded away. And eventually they all left except for Dave, who was just sat there, and me and one of the other leaders and Mike, the vicar. And after a bit, Dave said, Mike, and he said, yeah. He said, I did a job last week, and if I wanted to give the stuff back, what would I have to do? I mean, you could have knocked me over with a feather. I just kind of here, I'd only just become a Christian myself, and I knew what difference it made to my life. And here was someone else starting that journey, and I didn't believe. Well, I had to. It was incredible, and Dave kind of went from strength to strength. He was not known for his academic study or anything, but from reports from the school that he was going to, he used to attend school, and if anybody looked at him the wrong way, he'd get his big brother to come and beat them up. But he would go to school and he'd sit in the playground with a Bible, and other people from the school come up, "Oh, what are you doing, Dave?" He said, "Shut your face, I'm reading, just go away." And he'd sit there and read the Bible day after day in the playground. And he started attending church, and his life turned around. It became a postman, I think, in the end. God was incredible. Anyway, we continued on in that church, and all sorts of wonderful things happened there. Not least of which is that I met a wonderful girl called Sandra, whose name I promptly forgot, but she went to the school along with Dave, and she was able to help him on his journey a little bit as well, or at least she could see what God was doing in his life. And we started going out, and for the next year we continued on together until it came time for me to leave to go to... I finished my A-levels and managed to get enough to go and study computing in Cheltenham. And I left Barnstaple to go and live in Cheltenham. Now, one last thing before I finish this part of it is the journey from Barnstaple to Cheltenham. In order to get... I was going by train. I catch a train from Barnstaple to Exeter, and another one from Exeter to Taunton, and then another one from Taunton up to Cheltenham. And I put all my bits and pieces together and closed down finished the rent at the in my flat, and I'd arranged for lodgings in Cheltenham. And I got on the train with my bag of bits and a Bible and a book I was reading at the time called Disciple by Juan Ortiz, an amazing book. If you can still get a copy, it's well worth a read. And I got to Exeter, and I changed trains in Exeter, and then I got to Taunton, and I changed trains in Taunton. And the train I was on then was one of these trains with the passageway down one side, and then carriages that were with doors, like the old-fashioned ones you see on old films. So I was sitting in my own carriage, and I was on my own in there, and happily reading my book Disciple. And we were just about to pull out of Taunton, and a family came and joined me in the carriage. There was a mum, a dad, and a little baby. And so after a little bit, they said, "What are you reading?" So I said, "It's a book called Disciple by Juan Ortiz." I said, I'm a Christian, and this is a book that explains me more about what it means to be a Christian. And they said, "Oh, that's amazing." And I said, we've, as you can see, we've just had our new baby, and we were so overwhelmed by the birth of, I can't remember his name now, but call him Little Johnny, and that we wanted to say thank you to God. So we went to our local vicar and said, could we have a service to say thank you for little Johnny? And we explained at the time that we were just about to emigrate to Canada, and we need to have it done fairly quickly. And the vicar really wasn't very helpful. He said that they needed to attend the church for a while before he could do the service for them. And they said, well, we can't do that. We're just about to emigrate to Canada. So we kind of weren't able to do it. And I said, oh, that's really sad. He said, can you tell us, what it means about being a Christian? Yes, okay. Well, as much as I can. I said, I've only been really one for a short while. And so I proceeded to explain about what it meant to be a Christian, and about Jesus and what he'd done for us, and so on. And they said, that sounds amazing. Could we become Christians? I said, yes, of course. And so there and then I prayed with them in the car for them and mum and dad and the little baby. And they were going off on the train was going to take them to Liverpool, and they were flying from Liverpool to Canada. We got to Cheltenham, and I had to get off, but I gave them my copy of Disciple. I gave them my Bible, and I told them to look for a church that said the same things that I'd been saying, and off they went. And to this day, I can't remember their name, and I don't know, I can't remember much about them other than that just in that short hour or so on the train, I then was able to lead them to the Lord. And it was for me just an amazing affirmation of continuing on the journey that God had started me on those few years before at the school, that he was calling me, but I was on the right path. I was doing what he wanted me to do. And I got to Cheltenham and started my training to be a computer programmer. And more, well, I just have to watch this space for the next video and my testimony part 3.